So this is interesting. I just finished editing a 25-minute video on my camera opinions of the iPhone 13 Pro under the pretense ProRes wasn't available. But as of yesterday, it now is. We'll take two. Let's see if this is worth the hype. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, I want to have a look at the new ProRes feature on the iPhone 13 Pro and see if it really increases the iPhone's value as a filmmaking tool. So technically speaking, it's not actually released as a feature just yet, but the team over at FiLMiC Pro, an amazing application that gives you professional controls while recording video on your iPhone, managed to find their way to the API. This is basically the code that allows applications to access different features of the phone, and as of this week, they've released an update before Apple has officially turned on the feature in iOS 15, which in turn gives us filmmakers the ability to try the feature and gather some thoughts and opinions. If you're watching this, you most likely already know what ProRes is, but for the few who haven't heard of it before Apple's event, ProRes is a recording codec used on professional productions which allows you to capture more information in the image with much less compression than what you'd get with the basic camera app on the iPhone. This in turn makes it easier for computers to edit because they have to do much less work to play back the files, but also results in bigger file sizes. Much bigger. You may or may not have already seen, but last week I went out with my iPhone 13 Pro and set myself the challenge to shoot, edit, and upload an entire video on my phone. If you haven't seen it, I'll leave a link in the card above and the description below. But last week, as you know, we didn't have ProRes, and I was shooting an 8-bit 420 H.264 through FiLMiC Pro. And I was still massively impressed with the results of what these cameras could achieve. My main issue with the image though wasn't in the details. I think these new lenses and sensors have the ability to capture a great amount of information, but I was still seeing a limited amount of dynamic range, especially in scenes with high amounts of contrast, and this usually resulted in a lot of noise in the shadow parts of the image. I found this especially apparent on the ultra-wide and telephoto lenses, while the main wide sensor definitely fared the best. In fact, in some scenes, I was even able to get a natural shallow depth of field look thanks to the improved amount of light it can now take in. So how does ProRes stack up against it? Well, the first thing I did this morning was reinstall the FiLMiC app because it wasn't showing me the ProRes option, and started getting some test shots. But not against the default camera app on iOS, because the camera app is so limited in the controls it gives filmmakers. I've always gravitated towards FiLMiC Pro to give me the best results. It allows me to set and lock the exposure, focus, and white balance separately. So instead, I was comparing it against the 10-bit codec on FiLMiC Pro because up until yesterday, this was the best quality you could pull out of your iPhone's camera. And what I got was better for sure, but potentially not as drastic a difference as what I saw in Michael Tobin's video. There was more detail than what I was getting with the FiLMiC Extreme codec in 10-bit, and the image overall appeared less digitally sharpened, which first of all makes it much more pleasing to the eye, and also gives you more opportunities to add sharpness later on in the editing stage if you'd like. I also really appreciated how I wasn't seeing less noise per se, but due to the lower compression rates, the noise was finer because it wasn't getting turned into blocky compression artifacts. And the fact that I was getting a much more robust file, which I felt comfortable denoising later on and adding some heavy color grading, was amazing too. And this probably goes to the biggest benefit of ProRes, which is if you're using an older computer, shooting and editing the non-ProRes 10-bit codec on FiLMiC Pro might be really painful. You're most likely going to find it really struggle to play back smoothly, and it will take longer to render than using ProRes, which is much less compressed. And overall, if you're working on any production where you care about image fidelity, ProRes is the obvious choice to shoot on the iPhone if you can. The simple equation I like to keep in my head is more compression equals worse image quality, but less compression equals more dollars in hard drive and storage. And that's something to keep in mind, which you're going to hear a lot, is how much storage this is going to take up if you choose to shoot in ProRes. I currently have the 512GB model of the iPhone 13 Pro with around 260GB free after all of my other apps and media. And FiLMiC is saying I can get 54 minutes worth of ProRes 422HQ, which isn't bad if you've used other mirrorless or prosumer cameras before, but it's a shock to regular iPhone users. In my opinion, this is a feature reserved for a very niche audience, pro filmmakers, being marketed to the masses. So when is it actually going to be useful? Well, if you only have your iPhone on you when you happen to be in Iceland, for example, and you want to capture an amazing video of the mountain scenery for your cinematic masterpiece, I would flick it to ProRes and get the best quality. But if you're shooting a vlog or even a casual YouTube video, the 10-bit codec on FiLMiC Pro probably makes the most sense because of the good trade-off between quality and file size, as long as your computer can edit it properly. And if not, go to the 8-bit and turn off HEVC, and that will still give you some great results like it did in my previous video. I would also like to mention as well that ProRes also doesn't do much to address my original drawbacks of the limited dynamic range. So it's still very important to get the right exposure when shooting, otherwise once highlights are clipped, they're gone. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to use FiLMiC Log 3, which is a flat color profile with ProRes recording to maximize this, but in the meantime you can only shoot in the normal color profile. However, the main problem you're going to run into when shooting ProRes is managing files on your phone. Right now in FiLMiC Pro, you could technically transfer them in 3 ways. The first is by saving them to your photos and using iCloud Photo Library to sync them. Terrible idea. Airdropping them, which again can be quite time consuming and requires a solid Wi-Fi connection. And lastly, USB transfer, which I didn't realize until this feature came out, is actually the equivalent of USB 2.0 even on the new iPhones, which explains why my music took so long to sync. And even though that doesn't sound so bad, to put it into context, a 5.5-minute 4K video, which was 25 gigabytes in size, took 15 minutes to transfer onto my MacBook Air by cable and just over 10 minutes through AirDrop. And worse still is on the Mac, you don't get a progress bar to show you when the file transfer is going to finish unless you use AirDrop. So this is probably the main drawback for me. The time it takes to transfer files is painfully slow. And this will make it really difficult to use this feature on any content where you need a fast turnaround. Especially people who've got used to shooting on cameras and using SD cards for fast transfers to a solid state drive, this is like going back quite a few years. The benefit, of course, is having the ability to shoot ProRes in your pocket whenever you'd like, but this is a pro codec on a phone where the workflow isn't quite up to the same standard just yet because of that transfer speed bottleneck. And this goes to my last point, which is the great divide between consumers and professionals. The iPhone has always been designed to be simple and make it easy for the everyday person to get what they need with the least amount of trouble possible. iOS compresses your videos heavily on the default camera app because it means you can take a lot of them before you fill up your storage. And for most people, they would never care about the quality loss that comes with it. But for professionals who are using their iPhones to mix in with higher end cameras or care about having that 10 to 15% increase in detail, this is for those people. The irony is when the ecosystem has always been designed to make things easier, features like ProRes can actually make things more difficult, especially when using it with features such as iCloud Photo Library, which is designed to sync all of your media across devices. My advice to people shooting ProRes on your iPhone is to treat it more like a professional camera workflow. Shoot it, offload it, and then delete it from the phone once you have it all backed up. The more you want to keep it on your phone, it'll just be these massive files which don't give you much benefit besides what's possible later on in the post-production workflow. For all of the other videos you take, use FiLMiC Pro's Extreme Codec if you want to get the best mix of quality and file sizes. And for taking videos of your kids or having fun with your friends, use the basic camera app because it's designed to be foolproof. And these days with the Dolby HDR capture and playback, it looks great too on these beautiful OLED screens on the phone itself. It just doesn't do so well if your main goal is to edit and manipulate it later on. My main point being, don't let marketing make you feel like the regular video you're getting from your phone isn't good enough. Professional video production has always been a trade-off between quality and file size. Even in the corporate world, I've shot many productions in 8-bit because the quality benefit of shooting 10-bit or RAW just didn't make sense. And potentially the client wasn't paying enough to justify it either. But as long as we're not talking about night and day differences where your video is either a potato or it's so crisp, it's like a potato chip, then my thinking is go with what makes the most sense. And ProRes, while an awesome feature to have available, won't always make the most sense to everyone. So there are my initial thoughts. Thanks so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to like it and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts or questions below, and I'll see you all in the next video.